Hello and welcome everybody, and thank you for joining me again. My name is Wilkie, and basically what I'm showing you here is basically a build I made which sort of acts like a core build for Ranger. The reason I'm showing you that with a skill calculator is basically to avoid any confusion and to show you guys how many skill points you actually need. So basically this core build is situated at around 357 skill points, which is something most people should be able, at least more or less, should be able to finish up at level 50. So that's pretty much the reason why I picked certain skills and kind of left out others. But yeah, basically, the first skill is Bow Skill Axe. Now this one affects three things. One, your basic attack if you stand still, shoot LMB or hold shift and press LMB. The second one is being horse combat, so if you have the stirrups and you can shoot from the back of your horse, this skill will help you increase the damage. And a third one, which is kind of a hidden one I guess, is if you use ultimate evasive explosion shot and you press LMB after that in mid-air. Let me just show you what that looks like. Basically, I'll be hopping between the skill build and the in-game. Hold up. If you use RMB and then LMB, you can see that umbrella-like AoE cone. And that skill or that damage is affected by bow skill and not the rank of evasive explosion shot. So the reason you see me not putting any more points into evasive explosion shot is because the damage you will deal with that skill is not from the initial explosion, but from that AoE shot afterwards. So that's pretty much the reason why I kept it at rank 1 for the core build. Same thing applies basically to bow skill. If you need the skill points into other skills, try to rank it up to, I don't know, A or like 6, 7, 8. You don't necessarily have to max it right away because the last stages are going to be quite expensive. So if you can afford to max it, do so. But getting it to like 6, 7, or 8 is perfectly fine as well. Now, Dagger Skills, I don't really think I have to talk about that. Moving Shot, only good for pulling. Charging Wind, or rather Ultimate Charging Wind, your shotgun move, is probably one of your most damaging skills, maybe even the highest DPS skill you can use. Definitely a core thing you will want at level 50. Razor Wind, a lot of people, or many guides actually, tell people to take that skill. I don't see the use of that skill before level 53 or even higher, and even then, you don't really need it because it's only a PvE skill, and right now, for the mobs and the bosses we're taking down, it's not really mandatory to have that skill max. So unless you're really digging PvE and not really caring about PvP, you can take the skill before anything else. I wouldn't recommend taking it though. Pinpoint is on by default. That skill is okay to recover stamina, but I don't really see the point of ranking that up in a core build. It's not really important. Now, Ultimate Evasive Shot, that is pretty much what allows Ranger to become Ranger with all of the dashes, all of the cancellings. Definitive, max this skill once you hit 41. This is when you can take Ultimate Evasive Shot. This is what makes Ranger Ranger. So, Evasive Explosion Shot, we already talked about this. So, the reason you keep this skill at rank 1 in a core build is to reduce the mana costs it'll take you to actually trigger the explosion. Because as I said, the damage from the explosion is not really that big, and you rather have that skill to be able to be used 3 times in a row, but you can still use the AoE afterwards, so the damage is completely different from this skill. So basically ranking this skill up will only increase the damage of the initial explosion and the radius, but it will not have any effect on the LMB AoE afterwards. So don't really take that skill further up unless you have the skill point and you have maxed everything else. So, Blasting Gust 3, this is pretty much the second, or rather actually the main skill you're going to be using, or the main cancel you're going to be using in PvP. Now, the reason for that is at rank 3, this skill adds 10% of your max HP as extra damage, which causes this skill to deal a considerable amount of damage due to the fact that you can spam it around 3 to 4 times per second. So this one is pretty much your main go-to skill in PvP, my bad. Unless you hit multiple targets, because the downside of that skill is that the damage is spread between targets. So if you hit more than one person, or let's say you hit 2 people instead of 1, it's not like they will both take 100% damage, but rather both of them will take 50% damage of the initial shot. So the more people you hit with that, the lower the actual damage to each individual will be, making this a less suitable option for AoE PvP damage. Will of the Wind, while coming at a pretty high MP cost, it reduces enemy defense by 12 points at max rank. Very, very good skill, very easy to use, very easy to cancel. Deals a pretty high amount of damage, and as I said, that debuff comes quite handy for both PvE and PvP. So if you can, try to open fights using Will of the Wind in order to place the debuff on the enemy. Last but not least, Call of the Earth. You don't need this skill, as I said, but it's 3 skill points, and once you get used to how the Call of Earth works, the radius of the buff and everything, you'll be using that skill somewhat more often in the future, I guess, but it's not really necessary. So basically, the focus should be relying on Ultimate Charging Wind, Ultimate Evasive Shot, Rank 1 Evasive Explosive Shot, Blasting Gust 3, don't take the ultimate, it's of no use for PvP, and try to max Will of the Wind. As for passives, you only really need Call from Sky for this build. Anything else will be an option once you have more skill points to actually use any of the other passives, but right now, this is pretty much all you need. The only optional thing would be Flow Pinpointing Gust, in order to allow people to use Blasting Gust without the spin, but instead using Pinpoint and then simply hitting Q in order to trigger it. Yeah, I think that is pretty much all. As I said, this build sits around at 367 skill points, so it is a very, very doable build at level 50, and once you're at that point, you either have enough knowledge, or you may want to look into different people's builds, or I will make a more fleshed out build later this week as well. Anyways, if you have any questions regarding builds or skill points, or basically some certain skills you're not sure if you should be taking or not, feel free to ask me. And yeah, as I said, I'll try to make a more fleshed out build for people who are 51, 52, 53 or even higher, so you actually know what skills you should be focusing on. Anyways, hopefully you guys learned something, and yeah, if you need to know something else, feel free to leave me a message.